The market was loud with alien voices, neon lights flickering over piles of junk, parts, and desperate souls. On a dusty wooden platform near the back wall, a thin alien woman sat with her arms around a small child. Her skin was a soft lavender shade, her clothes torn, her silver hair tangled. Not even when someone shouted, "5 credits for that trash." People laughed. She didn't move. Her daughter, maybe 5 or 6 years old, hid behind her mother's leg, eyes wide and glowing. Her fingers clung tightly to her mother's worn tunic, as if the fabric could protect her. The auctioneer didn't even try to make a proper sales speech. He just waved his hand and said, "One mother and child, weak, no skills. Anyone want?" More. Laughter. Someone threw a piece of food. It hit her shoulder. She still didn't move. At the edge of the crowd, a human man named Reed stood watching. He was in his 30s, a traveler, trader, someone who had seen too much pain in too many corners of the galaxy. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. But his heart was not cold. As the crowd lost interest and began to move on, Reed stepped forward. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow. "You want this?" Reed didn't answer him. He knelt and he knelt and he looked into the alien woman's eyes for the first time. She looked up. Her eyes were deep with sadness, like someone who had given up on being saved. She didn't speak. She didn't beg. She just looked at him, silent, waiting to be rejected again. Reed reached into his bag. He had only a few credits left, but instead of showing the money, he gently reached out his hand. The crowd went quiet. The auctioneer frowned. "You buying or just playing hero?" Someone yelled from the back. Reed ignored them all. He whispered to the alien woman in a voice only she could hear, "You're not for sale. You're my family now." She blinked. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, but no words. Her child stared at him with confusion and hope. Reed stood up and handed over just 1 credit. The auctioneer grabbed it, rolled his eyes, and said, "Fine, take them. Not like anyone else wants that burden." The alien woman stood slowly, weakly, like someone who had forgotten what standing felt like. She took her daughter's hand, and they followed the human out of the market. No chains, no orders, no fear, just a man who didn't laugh, who didn't look at them like things. Outside the market, the alien woman finally spoke. "Why?" she asked softly. Reed stopped walking. "Because someone should have done the same for my mother," he said. She looked down, then nodded. Small nod, almost invisible. But it was a start. The child held Reed's hand now too. 3 strangers walking into the unknown. But for the first time, maybe not alone. The night air was cold as they walked through the narrow streets of the lower district. The alien woman held her child close, her bare feet moving carefully over broken pavement. Reed walked ahead, not speaking, his eyes scanning for trouble. His jacket hung over her shoulders now, too big for her small frame, but it kept her warm. She didn't even know his name until they reached his small storage unit near the industrial docks. It was nothing fancy, just a metal shelter with a folding bed, heater, and a water tank. But when he opened the door and stepped aside, she hesitated. "Go in," he said gently. She looked around. No guards, no doors locking behind her, just warmth and quiet. She stepped inside slowly, holding her daughter's hand. The child gasped softly at the small heater glowing in the corner. She rushed to it and sat near it, stretching her hands to feel the heat. Reed didn't say anything. He just dropped his bag and poured water into 2 cups. He handed one to the woman. She took it with shaking hands, sniffed it like it was too good to be real, then sipped. After a moment, she finally asked, "Why did you help us?" Reed leaned against the wall. He needed help. "No one helps a mother like me," she whispered, eyes on the ground. "We are always sold, always discarded." Reed sat down. "Not by me." There was silence for a few moments, just the low hum of the heater and the soft breathing of the little girl. Then the woman looked up and asked, "What is your name?" "Reed." She nodded slowly. "I am Soraya. My daughter's name is Kira." Reed smiled softly at the girl. "Hi, Kira." The child didn't speak. She just looked at him with wide, tired eyes and hugged her mother's side. Soraya's hands tightened around the cup. "You should know. The ones who sold us, they'll be angry. I escaped from a noble household. They'll come looking." Reed raised an eyebrow. "They can come. They'll find out I don't sell people, and I don't return them either." Soraya looked stunned. She didn't know whether to be afraid or grateful. That night, Reed gave them the bed and slept on the floor, despite Soraya insisting he didn't need to. When she finally lay down, she watched him from the corner of her eye. Not because she was afraid he'd harm them, but because she couldn't believe he was real. The next morning, everything changed. When Reed left the unit to get food, Soraya tried to wash her face using a damp cloth. She spotted herself in the small broken mirror hanging by a nail. Her face looked older than she remembered. Her eyes were sunken, her lips cracked, her cheeks hollow. But there was something new. There was something soft. Just behind the fear, Kira came up behind her and whispered, "Is he really not selling us?" Soraya hugged her. "No, my love, he isn't." But as soon as they stepped outside later that day, a drone circled overhead and stopped midair. Its red light blinked, and a voice spoke from it. "Alien servant registered as Soraya 3. You are in breach of property return law. Surrender now." Soraya froze. Her arms instinctively wrapped around Kira. Reed stepped in front of them. "With me, she's not your property." The drone scanned him. "Human, you are interfering with legal auction recovery. Stand down." Reed pulled a small device from his belt and pointed it at the drone. "Air. Leave. Now." The drone hovered for a moment longer, then zipped away into the sky. Soraya was shaking. Reed turned to her and said, "You're not going back to them, but they'll send more," she whispered. He nodded. "Then we prepare. We find a place where they can't touch you." She blinked. "You would help us escape the city?" Reed didn't answer. He just looked at Kira and said, "You both belong with someone who sees you as people, not product." The trust in Soraya's eyes wasn't complete yet, but it had begun. That night, Soraya cooked for the first time in years. The scent of hot broth filled the small shelter. Kira smiled. Reed smiled too, and outside across the alleyway, a tall figure in a dark cloak watched the window, silent, waiting, tracking them. Tomorrow wouldn't be safe, but tonight, for the first time, felt like home. Asterisk. The next morning, Soraya woke. Up early to the sound of soft breathing. Her daughter Kira was curled up beside her, fast asleep, her small hand holding onto her mother's torn sleeve. The room was quiet except for the gentle hum of the heater. It felt strange, this silence. Not the silence of fear or hiding, but a calm she hadn't known in years. She looked around the small shelter. The blankets Red had given them were still warm. A plate with some leftover stew was on the table. In the corner, Reed was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, a datapad in his hand. He was awake, reading something. Soraya sat up slowly. "You didn't sleep again," she said softly. Reed looked over at her and shrugged. Didn't want to miss anything. That drone yesterday might have sent a location ping. Her expression tight. "They're not going to stop." "I know," he said. He stood up and tapped the screen on his datapad. "I've been making plans." Soraya tilted her head. "Plans?" He showed her the screen. It displayed a rough map of the city. There's a freight ship leaving for a colony world in 2 nights. "I know someone on the crew." "They don't ask questions." Her eyes widened. "You mean, you want us to leave with you?" "I want you to be free," he said. "But if you're coming, we need to move soon. This place isn't safe anymore." Kira stirred and opened her eyes. She looked around groggily, then yawned and hugged her mother's side. Reed knelt beside them. "I'll teach you how to hide your energy signature. Their scanners track heat and movement. We'll mask it with mining suits." Soraya looked at him long and hard. "Why do all this, really? Why not just drop us in a safer zone and move on with your life?" Reed hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Because once, a woman like you saved my life, and I never got to repay her. Maybe this is how I do it now." They've packed that day. As night approached, They dressed in thick mining uniforms, heavy boots, and face covers to avoid being recognized. Kira didn't understand most of what was happening, but she stayed quiet and followed every instruction. The little girl was quick and observant, and Reed noticed how tightly she watched her mother, copying her movements. As they exited the shelter, under cover of darkness, something felt off. Reed froze near a trash chute and motioned for them to stop. He pulled out a small handheld scanner and swept the area. 3 faint signals, moving slowly. "Closing in? We're not alone," he whispered. He led them through a side alley, but they hadn't gone far when a shadow moved at the end of the street. Soraya. The voice was cold, familiar. She stopped dead in her tracks. Reed stepped between her and the figure, his body tense. From the shadows emerged a tall alien with glowing green eyes and black armor. It was one of the royal enforcers Soraya knew. "Him, you were warned," the alien said, his voice low and sharp. "You escaped your position and took Imperial property with you." Soraya trembled. "Kira is my daughter, not property." "She is of royal blood," the enforcer snapped.
"You know the law?"
Reed stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "You want them? You'll have to go through me." The enforcer gave a cruel smirk. "That can be arranged." Suddenly 2 more figures appeared behind him. Reed reached into his belt and threw a flash pellet down. Light exploded everywhere, blinding the enforcers for a moment. "Run," shouted, grabbing Soraya's hand and pulling her through a side passage. They ran through the alleyways, twisting and turning until they burst into the lower train yard. Machinery roared around them. Cargo lifts clanged. The smell of oil and steel filled the air. Reed shoved open a service hatch and pulled them inside. They collapsed inside a maintenance tunnel, breathless. Soraya clutched Kira tight, heart pounding there. "Not going to stop, are they?" she whispered. Reed shook his head. "No, not until they believe you're dead." She looked at him. "Then we fake it." He blinked. Soraya's face was calm now, fierce. "We fake our deaths." "You said you know someone on that ship? Then we need to vanish completely." Reed stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's the only way." As Kira slept in her mother's arms that night, Soraya didn't sleep. She had been running for too long, but now she was ready to fight for her daughter and the human beside her. He was no longer just a stranger. He was the only one who called her family. Asterisk, the tunnels beneath the city were older than most remembered. Built during the first wave of colonization, they were supposed to carry water and power lines, but now they carried ghosts, smugglers, and those who didn't want to be found. The air was damp, the walls dripped slowly, and the silence carried secrets. Reed's boots splashed through puddles as he led Soraya and Kira deeper. A rusted sign on the wall read, Zone 12A abandoned. He had memorized the layout of this sector from his scavenger days, back when he used to trade stolen tech for food credits. Now those same tunnels were keeping them alive. Soraya held Kira in one arm, using her other hand to steady herself against the wall. Her leg had begun to ache from the long run, but she didn't complain. She had learned long ago, pain was better than capture up ahead. Reed stopped at a wide maintenance door. He placed a worn-out circuit chip into a panel slot. The door groaned, metal grinding against metal, and then opened into a dark chamber. Inside, it was dry, with crates and old tarps covering the corners. The place smelled like dust and grease, but it was hidden, safe. "For now," Reed said, stepping aside so they could enter. Kira's tiny feet padded across the metal floor. She spotted an old blanket and grabbed it eagerly, wrapping herself tight. Soraya sat down slowly, watching Reed. "You said you had a plan to fake our deaths," she whispered. He nodded. "I do. But we'll need to risk one thing first. Public broadcast." Her eyes widened. "Are you crazy?" "No," he said. "Just loud enough to make them believe what we want them to believe." He sat down across from her and pulled out a cracked transmitter. "Mild contact. Darrow runs a pirate channel. He owes me. We'll send a message. Say that the woman they're chasing died in a fire during a fight. We'll send them a location. Rig the spot to explode. Leap. Remains they can trace, clothing, hair, blood." Soraya stared at him. "You've done this before?" I've done worse, Reed said quietly. Kira looked up, her voice soft. Will I still be your daughter after we fake our deaths? Both adults turned to her. Soraya reached out and held her close. You'll always be mine. Then she looked at Reed. His answer was simple. You were mine the moment I saw you hold your mama and not cry. That night, the plan began. Reed snuck back into the surface to get supplies, synthetic blood, bones from a scrapyard, pieces of fabric from Soraya's old robe. He avoided security drones, used back routes, and even climbed through the exhaust vents of the power plant to bypass patrols. Meanwhile, Soraya sat with her daughter, whispering old lullabies from her homeworld. Her people were singers once. Before the Empire taught them silence, she hadn't sung in years. Her voice was soft, shaky, but real. Reed returned hours later, covered in soot. He handed her the robe. Rip it, stain it, and make it look like you died trying to escape. Soraya stared at the cloth. Slowly, she nodded and tore it apart. By dawn, everything was ready. They made the fire in an old fusion garage on the edge of the city, the perfect place for an accident. Reed's contact broadcasted the fake footage, showing Imperial agents storming the garage. It's a violent flash and then silence. The fake body parts were placed, the DNA samples planted. Within an hour, the bounty on Soraya vanished from the network. By evening, the patrols had shifted. The city believed she was dead, but the risk was not over. When they returned to the tunnels, figure was waiting in the shadows. Soraya pulled Kira behind her. Reed raised a tool in his hand. Who's there? A voice spoke from the darkness, old and gravelly. You think you're the first to run from the crown? A man stepped out, a tall, bearded alien with cybernetic arms and a long coat. His left eye glowed blue. Names. Boren. I watched your broadcast, he said. Good work, but sloppy on the heat signature. You'll need better cloaking if you want to survive off-world. Reed didn't lower his weapon. Why are you here? My smuggle family's Boren said plainly. Not for money, for revenge. I lost mine long ago. He looked down at Kira, then at Soraya. You want to disappear for good? I can help, but it won't be easy. We'll have to change everything: name, appearance, even how you talk. Soraya looked at Reed, then at Boren. And then she said, without fear, what do we do first? Boren grinned. We burn your old self. And then we teach the girl to never kneel again. Something had changed. She was no longer running. Now, she was preparing to rise. Asterisk, the fire burned quietly in the hidden cavern, deep beneath the city's bones. It wasn't a real fire, just flickering light from an old holoprojector. Boren had salvaged, but it was enough to make the place feel alive. Around it sat the new family, Reed, Soraya, and little Kira, listening to the smuggler lay out the cost of survival. Boren's voice echoed in the stone walls. There's no such thing as freedom unless you're ready to let go of everything, even your name. Soraya stared into the flickering light. I've already lost my name. My people called me mother. The nobles called me servant. I don't know what's left. Boren leaned forward. Then you're ready. He opened a long, flat case and pulled out a Tula microbrander. This will change your retinal signature. Painful, but permanent. I've done it to myself and over 20 others. No scanner will know you. Reed didn't hesitate. Do mine first. Kira looked up, alarmed. Will it hurt? Reed smiled down at her a little. But it's how we beat the bad guys. She blinked. Then I want it too. No, Soraya said quickly, pulling her daughter close. Not her. She's just a child. Boren nodded. Then we do it another way. We fake her scan with a clone biopatch. It won't last forever, but long enough to pass inspection. The process was brutal. Reed's eyes watered and clenched as the tool buzzed, pressing into the outer edges of his iris. Soraya looked away during hers, biting her tongue to stop from crying out. She had already bled for others this time. She bled for herself. Hours later, Reed and Soraya lay on the cold floor, covered in blankets, eyes red and raw, but free. You have 2 days, Boren said, cleaning his tools. Then I take you on my supply run. We pass through port control using false IDs. If they scan too deep, we fight. so be ready." Soraya sat up. "Fight how?" Boren tossed her a metal baton. "You ever use one of these?" She caught it, surprised. "Guess." "Before the Empire made." "Me wear chains?" Reed raised a brow. "You were trained?" Soraya nodded. "All my sisters were." The next day was a blur of training and preparation. Soraya sparred with Boren, while Reed ran drills with outdated blasters. Kira practiced staying silent, hiding inside crates, crawling through narrow pipes. She didn't complain. Not once. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to help her mother and Reed. But just when things felt steady, the past knocked again. It came. In the form of a coded message, Reed's datapad beeped. Unknown origin. No voice, just text. "The girl has noble blood. She is claimed. Turn her or die." Reed stared at the message. Soraya read it over his shoulder, her heart sinking. "They found us." "No," Reed said. "They never stopped looking." Boren paced behind them. "This changes the plan. They won't just scan now. They'll inspect. I'll bring scent trackers and psi readers." Soraya clenched her fists. "Then we leave early." Boren shook his head. "That's suicide. The port gates only open at shift change. You walk in now. They'll have guns on every level." Reed thought for a moment. Then his eyes drifted to Kira, who was sitting on a metal crate, drawing something. With chalk she had found, the drawing showed 3 stick figures. One tall, one medium, one tiny. All holding hands under a crooked star. He looked at Soraya. "We go anyway. You just said." "I know. But the longer we wait, the more." "Doors close?" "You said she's noble-born, right?" Soraya nodded slowly. Reed pointed at the chalk drawing. "Then we use that." Later that night, disguised in thick robes and carrying fake ID chips, the 3 of them walked to the edge of the cargo district. Boren guided them through the shadows. The smuggler whispered, "Once you're inside, head to Dock 14. I'll delay the scan team. But if I go down, you keep moving." Soraya hesitated. "Why are you helping us?" Boren looked at Kira. "My daughter would have looked just like her." If they hadn't taken her, he vanished into the fog before Soraya could speak again. They reached the port gates. Guards in black armor scanned the crowd. Soraya gripped Reed's hand. Kira walked between them, eyes wide. As they passed through the first checkpoint, a guard stepped forward. "You? Remove your hoods." Reed did. Soraya did. Kira hesitated, but then followed. The guard leaned close. The scanner beeped once, then twice. His eyes narrowed. "Your child's scan is corrupted." Soraya's heart stopped. Reed reached for something in his jacket. Then Kira did something no one expected. She stepped forward and hugged the guard's leg. The room went still. The guard blinked. "What are you? I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered. "You helped my new dad and my mom. You're kind." The guard's mouth opened slightly. Then he looked at the scan again and waved them through. Soraya didn't breathe until they were on the lift to Dock 14. Reed laughed softly. "She's going to get us all out alive," he whispered. Soraya looked down at her daughter, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. The docking bay was colder than the tunnels and twice as dangerous. Steam hissed from exposed vents. Massive cargo containers floated on magnetic lifts, each one taller than a house. Machines buzzed, engines roared, and the smell of burned oil filled the air. Among all this noise, Soraya, Red, and Kira moved like shadows, hoods low, steps quick, never looking back. They had made it through the outer scan ring, but they weren't safe yet. Dock 14 was across the main loading corridor, just beyond the customs checkpoint and 2 armed patrols. Their shipborne's disguised hauler was docked and ready, its loading ramp already half lowered. But between them and freedom stood 100 chances for discovery. Reed pulled Soraya into a tight side path near a power junction. Kira followed, quiet as ever. "They've upgraded the checkpoint," Reed whispered. "That wasn't there yesterday." A new biometric scanner blinked at the far end, manned by 2 Empire officers with crimson face shields. If it scanned Soraya's heartbeat or Kira's brainwaves, the fake identities would shatter instantly. "We can't turn back now," Soraya said. "We're too close." Reed checked the time on his wristband. Bourne should have caused his distraction by now. As if summoned by the thought, a loud explosion echoed from the left side of the dockyard. Every light flickered. Klaxons blared. The customs officers turned sharply, speaking into their coms. Workers began running. Security bots rolled toward. The source of the blast. Reed grabbed Soraya's hand. Now, they bolted from the shadows, weaving between shipping crates. A fuel tank rolled past them. Sparks flew from a broken conduit. Kira held her mother's hand tight, running on tiny feet that never hesitated. Dock 14's ramp hissed open as they neared. But then a voice shouted, "Halt!" Imperial officer, not part of the checkpoint, had spotted them from a high platform. He raised a rifle. Reed didn't stop. He pushed Kira up the ramp. "Get her inside." Soraya turned to fight, but Reed shoved her too. "Go." He spun and fired his blaster. The officer ducked, but more guards appeared. Sirens screamed louder. Boots pounded toward the ship. Inside, Bourne limped into view, smoke on his coat. One side of his face bruised. "Close the ramp now," he yelled. Soraya slammed the panel. The ramp rose and bolts pinged off the hull. Reed sprinted and dove just. Before it sealed shut, he rolled onto the floor, gasping. Gravity shifted. Boxes tumbled. Kira screamed and clutched her mother. A blast hit the back of the ship butt. Bourne punched full thrust and shot upward through the industrial ceiling hatch. Soraya looked out the side window below them.
Ow.
The city became small, the Empire's shadow. Faded into smoke and sparks, they were free, but not safe. Inside the hauler, Bourne grunted, holding his ribs. They hit the rear thruster. "We've got 5, maybe 6 jumps left before we need repairs." Reed sat up, still out of breath. "That's enough. Just get us to the asteroid rings." Bourne nodded. And then Reed looked at Soraya. "We disappear for good." The next few hours were tense. Bourne navigated the ship into deep space, away from Empire travel lanes. He avoided beacon signals, drifted through static clouds. Kira sighed the whole time, but it wasn't fear in her eyes anymore. It was planning. She whispered quietly to her daughter, telling her stories, real ones this time, about their home world before it was taken. About her grandmother, who once led a rebellion with nothing but her voice and a farming blade. About the rivers that glowed in the dark. About honor. About love. Kira didn't speak. She just listened, as if hearing it all filled the holes that slavery had carved into her. Later, as Reed stood at the observation window, Soraya joined him. "You could have left us back there," she said. "I could have," he agreed. "But you didn't." He looked at her. "Neither did you. You could have given her up to save yourself." She looked at him, searching his face. "What happens now?" "We find a place where no one knows our names. We build something. A home." Soraya looked back toward the room where Kira was drawing stars on the ship floor. "Family?" she whispered. He nodded. "If you'll have me." She didn't answer with words. She just took his hand and didn't let go. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly across the black. But for the first time, Soraya wasn't lost in them. She was heading home, even if she didn't know where that was yet. Asterisk, the stars blurred past the window like rain down a windshield. Bourne's ship drifted silently now, hidden deep inside the asteroid rings of the Derrick system. Ancient, forgotten, and almost impossible to scan, the belt had once been a hideout for pirates and smugglers. Now, it was home to something else. Beginning. Inside the ship, Soraya moved quietly through the living bay. Kira was curled up on a makeshift bed, fast asleep, her hands gripping the corner of a blanket Reed had given her. A small stuffed toya, simple patch of cloth sewn into the shape of a catres stood beside her. She had never owned anything before. Now she had a place, a toy, and warmth. Soraya turned the corner and stepped into the cockpit, where Reed and Bourne were arguing over a map. "We can't stay here forever," Reed said. "This ship won't last through another solar burst." Bourne tapped a small blinking light on the console. You're right, but I've got something. He pulled out a data chip and inserted it. It's a 3D map flickered to life, showing a quiet green world tucked far from any trade routes or imperial scans. It's called Ellis-Ernine, Bourne explained. Old terraforming project, abandoned by the corporations decades ago. Atmosphere stable, no settlements, no empire tracking. We build there, you start over. Soraya stepped forward. And you, Bourne smirked. Me, I've got other ghosts to chase. But I'll drop you, help you settle in, and then I'll vanish. Like always. Asterisk Reed leaned back. Ellis-Ernine? Sounds like a myth. Bourne chuckled. Most good places do. It took 3 jumps to reach the planet. Each one stretched the ship's systems, but they made it. When they finally entered orbit, the view silenced everyone. Lissa-9 was beautiful. Forests as far as the eye could see, tall mountains covered in mist. Rivers like silver threads cut across green valleys. And in the north, a massive crater now turned into a shimmering lake. Reed stepped out first, scanning the air. Clean. Safe. No signals. No patrols, Soraya. Followed, holding Kira's hand. The little girl's eyes lit up as she stepped into the grass barefoot. She giggled, spinning slowly. It's soft, she whispered. They set up camp using scrap from the ship. Reed and Bourne constructed a shelter. Out of old hull panels, while Soraya started planting seeds from the survival kits, Kira ran between them, helping with anything she could, hauling tools, holding bolts, picking fruit from strange trees. By nightfall, a small fire crackled in front of the shelter. The 3 adults sat around it, watching stars fill the sky. Kira had fallen asleep in Soraya's lap, curled against her side. Bourne broke the silence. You don't owe me anything, you know. Soraya looked at him. I know. He stood and stretched. Then I'll go before dawn. I stay too long. I bring trouble. Reed stood too. Where will you go? Bourne looked at the stars. There's always another family to save. Another child like Kira. As long as the Empire lives, so will I. He turned to Soraya and held out a small beacon. If you ever need need me like this, I'll come. She took it without hesitation. I hope I never need it, but thank you. The next morning, Bourne was gone. His ship vanished. Without a sound, leaving only tracks in the soft soil. You're living. Months passed. Reed and Soraya built a small home using wreckage and local wood. It was simple: 1 room for sleeping, 1 for storage, and an open space with a view of the lake. They hunted, farmed. They taught Kira everything: how to plant, how to climb, how to read the stars. She learned fast, laughed louder, and no longer woke up screaming from dreams of chains. One evening, as twilight settled over the valley, Soraya stood with Reed by the lake. The sky reflected perfectly in the water. Kira was catching fireflies nearby. You think they'll find us? Soraya asked quietly. Maybe, Reed replied. But if they do, they'll find more than a runaway servant. She turned to him. They'll find a mother who won't bow. He smiled, and a human who doesn't run. She took his hand again, the same way she did back in the tunnels. Firm. Certain. You called us family that day, she whispered. I meant it then. Stay. Be her father. Be mine. I didn't need to answer. He already had. Behind them, Kira shouted, Mama! Look, it glows. She held a firefly high, its soft green light dancing in the air. Soraya laughed and ran to her. Reed watched, heart full. This wasn't a happy ending. This was a beginning, quiet, brave, and real. On a distant planet no one remembered. An alien. Mother. A human man. And a little girl who had nothing now had everything. Not riches, not revenge, but something far stronger: a home, a future, and a family that no one could ever sell again.